وأصحابه أجمعين فقد نوينا التعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة نبيه ودعاء إلى الهدى ودلالة على خير وكل ما نواه مشايخنا ابتغاء وجه الله وثوابه وقربه. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. Alhamdulillah, in our discussions on Matn Al-Ajurrumiyya in Arabic grammar, we've been discussing the 4 types of inflections that words can go through, particularly nouns and verbs. We've also mentioned a second type of word in passing called the mabni. Right? The mabni is the word that does not enter into any discussions of inflection. Right? It's not related to any inflection. So you won't have, like for instance, a past tense verb. You wouldn't say that it's marfu' or mansub or majroor or majzoom, because that's only a designation made for words that are inflected. Now, the inflected words themselves, right? We mentioned 2 things specifically. One, that there's words that are fully inflected. Right? So you'll have a word that it can be, like for a noun, for instance, it can be marfu', it can be makhfood, mansub, right? And you'll be able to see the voweling exactly the way that the state that it's in. Right? So if it's marfu', you'll see the dhamma. If it's mansub, you'll see the fatha. If it's makhfood, or if you want to call it majroor, you'll see the kasra. But there are other kinds of words that are semi-inflected, the ghayrul munsarif. And it's called ghayrul munsarif in Arabic. There are the unique words like the non-Arabic names, the words that we described on the board that have 1 or 2 out of the 9 causes. They're semi-inflected. They're still inflected, right? They're not mabni. So like the word Yusuf, right? The name Yusuf, right? You can say Yusufu or Yusufa, but it doesn't get a kasra. It'll never get a kasra or a tanween, right? So they're called semi-inflected, ghayrul munsarif. So we want to just chart it out real quick before we jump into today's class, which is really kind of a summary of what we've been doing until we get to the section on verbs. Right, so if anyone didn't understand any of the previous classes, today is your chance for questions. Because can you guys see? Okay. Okay. So in regards to the states that words are in, right, there's 2 main types of words. There's the mabni, mabniyun. The mabni word is the word that doesn't get any inflection. It doesn't change whatsoever. Whatever vowel mark that it has at the moment, it will always have, and it will never change. Right? So you have words like fi, right? Or ala. Right? So they all never change. Right? Right? So you're not going to see fiyu or fiya, right? If it's mansub. No, you're not going to say that fi is mansub or majroor. Right? It's just a word. Right? Also part of that are any past tense verbs. Fa'ala. It's always fa'ala. It will always end in a fatha, but we don't say that it's mansub or it's majroor. It's just a past tense word. It's mabni. Right? So this has nothing to do with inflection. Those are a whole separate thing that we haven't gone into in the book yet. We've stayed in the realm of the mu'rab. Right? And the mu'rab is the word that accepts i'rab. Right? So hence the similarity in the word. Right? So they're from the same root letters. Alright, so the mu'rab, as we've been taking, let me just move this over slightly. Alright, so the mu'rab is the one that does accept inflection. It does accept a change in its ending, a change of the vowel on its ending. Right, now, that change on the ending can either be by bil harakat, by the voweling. So if I'll write it for you. What kind of word is harakat? Anyone? What kind of word gets that alif ta at the end? Good. The sound feminine plural, right? Because haraka by itself, just one, it literally means a movement. But here it means a vowel. Right? Harakatun is the plural. Right? So those are the words that their inflection is shown by a vowel. Right? The fatha, the dhamma, or the kasra. So you'll see rajulun, there's a dhamma. Rajulan, right? The fatha, and rajulin, the kasra. So this word is mu'rab, right? It's an inflected word, and it's mu'rab by haraka, by a vowel. Right? The other types are the mu'rab bil huruf, by letters. You can they are marfu', mansub, majroor, and these right? All the types that we mentioned, but you won't be able to tell by means of a vowel. Right? You're not looking for vowels in these types of words, rather you're looking for letters. Right? Now, we talked about this a few times, right? And I'll just write the examples without writing the category, because that would take a long time. We'll go through it in the slides, inshallah. Right, so let's just keep this simple. Right. Ash-shakirun. Right. The wow, the unbroken masculine plural. Right. The wow is the letter that you're looking for. Right. It ends in a fatha. That's right. That we ignore, because this type of word we're not going to be able to see the inflection through a vowel. Right. Dual. Right. Dual words you tell by the letters. The alif is the sign of marfu'. Right. The five nouns. Right. Aba Bakr. Right. This is just an example of a mansub word, but you tell by the alif. Abu Bakr by the waw, Abi Bakr by the ya. Right. And I believe there's one more that I'm forgetting. Yeah. And then when we talked about the vowels, right, if the noon remains, right, then it's marfu', so that's about a letter, right? So, and note, this is only for mudari', for the present tense verbs, because the past tense verbs are mabni, right? Right, so yaf'aluna, the noon stays, it's marfu'. If that noon is still there, it's marfu'. Right? If it's not there, then it's one of the other two types. This is a really tough angle here. Excuse my handwriting. Right? If the noon falls off, right, that's another sign. So that's still by the letter itself. So that's a rough breakdown of what we've been doing. Right? And the interesting thing, which I like to do with students in Arabic classes, is that I can write a whole board full of words, and everyone's following along completely. And then in the end, I'll tell the students, look on the board, there's not a single word in English. Well, this time I cheated, but you'd be surprised how slowly Arabic seeps in, and you won't even realize it. Right? And just to mention it, a lot of Arabic students, they critique their benefits on the basis of how much they can speak. And that's problematic, because we talked about vocabulary being completely separate from the grammar itself and being two different things, right? And even on the basis of the grammar, right, the real test of it right, is not really on the basis of speaking either. Right? I know people who can read even the hardest books of Arabic but can't speak a lick. Right? So he says in the book, rahimahullah ta'ala, al-mu'rabat qisman. The mu'rab words are two types. So you see that he made the word mu'rab, as we have there, plural, right? Mu'rabat is the unbroken feminine plural. Right? Al-mu'rabatu qismani. So this is interesting, right? Because even in the text itself, and many classical ways of teaching this book, they would actually use the lines of the text to teach the rulings. Right? So al-mu'rabatu, what type of inflection does that word have? It's marfu'. And what's the sign that it's marfu'? The dhamma, right? Right? So we know that the dhamma is a sign of marfu', right? Especially in the unbroken feminine plurals. You can see the dhamma clearly. Qismani. What inflection is that word? Qismani means two types. Qism is a type. Qismani is two types. It's marfu'. Good. Who said that? Alif. Right. So the sign that it's marfu' is the alif, even though it ends in a kasra. Qismani. Right? Because the dual, you always put the kasra on the end, but the kasra is irrelevant. Right? The alif is what shows. So he says, al-mu'rabatu qismani. The inflected words are two types. Qismun yu'rabu bil harakat. One type is inflected by vowel marks. Wa qismun yu'rabu bil huruf. And one type inflected by letters, which is what we have here on the board. Right? So now he breaks it down, each in their own. Right? And this is kind of a gathering of everything we've already done. So we're going to go through this a bit quickly, because you want to save time for the ending part on verbs. Right, so he lists them off. Which words can you tell the inflection or the i'rab, right, by vowels? He says those who are inflected by vowels are four types of words. Singular nouns. Right, on the board we have rajulun. That's a singular noun. Rajulun. So if we use, anyone remember the three sentences that we can use to test whether a word is marfu', mansub, or majroor? Anyone? Maybe I should write it bigger next time. Ja'a Zaydun. Ra'aytu Zaydan. And marartu bi Zaydin. So that's the way you can test any word in Arabic. Right, Ja'a means Ja'a Zaydun, Zayd came. So Zayd is the doer. All doers are marfu'. Right, Ra'aytu Zaydan, I saw Zayd. Zayd is the object. All objects are mansub. Right, so that's a way to test the mansub word. Right, and marartu bi Zaydin, I passed by Zayd. The word, the ba there is the harf jar. Right, it makes the next word majroor or makhfud. Right, so Zaydin. So Zayd there is a singular word. So in every one of those you can see its change by the changing of the vowel mark on the end of it. So Ja'a Zaydun, Ra'aytu Zaydan, Marartu bi Zaydin. The second is broken plurals. Right, so not sound plurals. Because the sound plural has different rules, both when it's a feminine, right, the feminine sound plural or the masculine sound plural. Right, the feminine sound plural, right, is known by vowels, which is number 3, but the masculine sound plural, like ash-shakirun, is known by letters, shakirun or shakirin. So ja'a rijalun, right? Ja'a rijalun, rijal means people instead of rajulun, person. So ja'a rijalun, the people came. Ra'aytu rijalan, I saw the people. So with fatha, marartu bi rijalin. The unbroken feminine plural. Can anyone give an example of an unbroken feminine plural? Muslimatun. Good. Right. Muslimatun is Muslim women. Right. So ja'a Right? You could make it feminine, but technically you don't have to. Right? Just for the example, we won't make it feminine. You can say ja'at, but it doesn't. Right? We don't have to be picky. So ja'a muslimatun, ra'aytu muslima. Oh, this is tricky. Muslimatin. Good. Right, so the unbroken feminine plural is known by its vowels, right, but there is that one exception, that when it's mansub and when it's majroor, it'll only be with a kasra. It can never get fathas. It's a special type of word, right, that it's limited insofar that it doesn't get fathah. You'll never see muslimatan. Right, it'll be ra'aytu muslimatin. So now how do you know? Right, how do you know that it's not majroor or makhfud in this situation? Right, you would say, okay, ra'aytu means I saw. Right? Saw meaning past tense. I saw. Ra'aytu. So the word after that must be an object. And all objects are mansub. So here, even though it's muslimatin with a kasra, you would say it's mansub, therefore it is maf'ul, it's the object, therefore it's mansub. And if you really want to be, to clarify to anyone, you would say that it's mansub, and the sign that it's mansub is that it has a kasra. Right? And it's the fact that it's an unbroken plural, the kasra is a sign that it's mansub. But if I said marartu bi muslimatin, now you can say, look, there's a B right there. Right? Anything that comes after B is makhfud. Right? We say bismillahi. Right? We don't say bismullahi or bismallahi. We say bismillahi because the ba makes the next word makhfud. So the unbroken feminine plurals are known by their vowels. Right? You'll see the dhamma if it's marfu', and you'll see a kasra if it's mansub or majroor. Right? And according to the context, you can distinguish whether it's mansub or majroor in that situation, right? Just like we mentioned just now. Right? And the last one is about verbs. Right? So he says, the mudari' verb, right, with nothing attached to its ending. Right, so how many people memorized the 14 verbs list? 1, 2. Anyone had a hard time? Anyone? It's tough, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. But it's the brain tends to let things in if you push it hard enough. Right. Reluctantly, though, I should say. Right, so the mudari' verbs that have nothing attached to the end are the singular ones. Right, so you have yaf'alu, right? He is doing. Taf'alu, she is doing. Right, taf'alu, a second taf'alu, which is you are doing. Right, then you have af'alu, I am doing, and naf'alu. So these 5, right, they're called the 5 verbs. Right, they have nothing attached to the end. So if you see a dhamma, that means they're marfu'. If you see a fatha, that means they're mansub. Right? Or if you see a sukun, that means they're majzoom. Right? And we left out the other one because verbs can never be makhfud. Right? That is something specific to nouns. So verbs can be either marfu', mansub, or majzoom. Right? Dhamma, fatha, or sukun. Right? The reason why he mentioned that there's nothing attached to the end is to exclude the ones that have a noon on the end. Right? Because yaf'aluna, the sign that it's marfu' is not because of a dhamma. It's not by a vowel mark that we can know. Right? It's because the noon hasn't fallen off. Right? So only those 5 are known by their vowel. The rest are known by the noon. Either it stays or it doesn't. So, if there's any questions, just jump in. This is more of a review until we get to the next part. So now he talks about the voweling directly. Right, and this is pretty clear cuts, right? So he says these types of words, because they're known by their vowels, right, are made makhfud by the kasra. Right? Zaydin, marartu bi zaydin. Right? They're become majzoom by a sukun. Lam yaf'al, sukun. Right? Lam taf'al, lam af'al, lam naf'al. The 5 verbs that we just mentioned. you'll see the sukoon on the end. Right? لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب. Right? In the Qur'an, you'll see a lot of examples. Alam tara. Right? We'll get to that in a minute because it ends in a sick letter. Right? Alam yaj'al kaydahum fi tadlil. Right? Yaj'alu becomes lam yaj'al, sukoon. Right? So they're made, right, majzoom with a sukoon. Okay? They're made marfu' with a dhamma, and they're made mansoob with a fatha. Pretty clear cut. That's what we've been doing. Right? But there are things that we have to note, right, that are exceptions to this. So that's the default. Right? If the word is a specific type of word, it might fall away from this default setting. Right? So there are three words that fall, right, that take a step aside from the defaults. Right? The first we just talked about is the unbroken feminine plural. Right? Muslimatin. So who can do the three sentences for us? Ja'a, ra'aytu, and marartu bi. Right? But using the word, let's use katibat. Anyone know what a katib is? A katib is a writer. Right? So a katibatun is a female writer. So but plural, katibat. Katibatun. Right? So who can do the ja'a, ra'aytu, and marartu bi for katibat? Any volunteers? I just start pointing people out. Go ahead. The first one's a doer, so the katibatun. Okay. Ra'aytu first. Katibatin. Ra'aytu katibatin. It's mansoob. And marartu bi katibatin. Right, so the only one that's not on its default is the mansoob. Right, right, technically, it would be ra'aytu katibatan with a fatha, but that type of word does not accept it. So this is why it's an exclusion, it's an exception to that default, only in the mansoob. Only in the mansoob, because in the makhfood it has kasra anyway. Right? Marartu bi katibatin. Right? The only one that should, right, that would be an exception would be ra'aytu. Ra'aytu katibatin instead of ten. So he says, right, the three exceptions. The first is the unbroken plural. It becomes mansoob by the kasra as well. Right? Not the default fatha. Right, the second is the semi-inflected nouns, which we talked about. Right, those specific words that they don't accept a kasra or a tanween. Right, so you say, Allah says in the Qur'an, in chapter of Yusuf, right, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي يُوسُفَ. Right, fi is one of those letters, like bi, ala, li. Right, they make the next word makhfood. Right, but here it's fi yusufa. So if somebody asked you what state of what inflection is Yusuf in this sentence, what would you say? لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي يُوسُفَ. Sorry? It's majrur, it's makhfood, right? It is makhfood, right? But because this is a semi-inflected noun, you won't see the kasra, rather you'll see a fatha in its place. So ja'a yusufu. Right? Say no tanween. Ja'a yusufu. Ra'aytu Yusufa, marartu bi Yusufa. Right, so only in those specific words. Like for instance, Hadramaut, my favorite city in the world. I should say second, technically, or third. Somebody could be really picky. Right? Or you can say that Hadramaut reminds you of the other two anyway. So dakhaltu means I entered. So dakhaltu Hadramauta, right? I entered Hadramaut. It's right, mansoob Hadramauta. Right? Marartu bi Hadramauta. Right? I passed by Hadramaut. It would still get a fatha, even though it's makhfood, because it's one of these semi-inflected words. Right? You have it's a proper noun, and it's tarkib. There's a compound word. So, and then the last one is an exception as well to the default, which is the mudari' verb that ends in a sick letter. The mudari' verb that ends in a sick letter. What are the sick letters? Anyone? Waw, alif, and ya. Right. So he says, right, that they become majzoom by the omission of the sick letter. The sick letter is dropped off. Right. We just mentioned that if it's any of the 5 verbs, yaf'al, taf'al, right, taf'al, af'al, and naf'al, then you'll see the sukun clearly. But if it ends in a sick letter, you won't. Right? That letter will just drop off. Right? So, like the word yajri. Anyone know what yajri means? To run. Right? To run. Right? Yajri means to run. So it was yajriyu, yaf'alu. Right? So if I make yajri majzoom, it becomes, right, instead of with a ya at the end, it becomes lam yajri, just ra with a kasra. The ya falls off. Right? If I, like the word yas'a comes in the Qur'an, right? Allah orders Musa alayhi salam to throw his staff. Right? فَإِذَا هِيَ حَيَّةٌ تَسْعَى. Right? And suddenly it becomes a snake that is running. Right? Sa'a has a similar meaning as yajri, but it ends in alif. Right? So if I say lam tas'a, just the fatha, the alif falls off, lam tas'a. Right? So the default is that you would see a sukun. If I use the regular word, lam yaj'al, lam yaktub, lam yashkur. Right? But because this word ends in a sick letter, that letter just falls off, right? And there is no sukun at the end. Right? Lam yajri, lam yas'a, lam yad'u. Right? Tamam. So those are the exceptions. So, any questions on that? So that was pretty much within a very short amount of time a summary of everything we've just done having to do with vowels. Right? So the default is, right, marfu' is a dhamma, mansub is a fatha, majrur is a kasra, and majzoom is a sukun. The only exception is the unbroken feminine plural. When it's mansub, it still gets a kasra. Right? And the semi-inflected word like Yusuf or Yahya or Musa, right, when they are makhfud, they still get a fatha. Right? And then the mudari' verb that is majzoom, if it has a sick letter on the end, that falls off. There's no sukun, even though the default is a sukun. So you could summarize all of that up in 5 sentences. Okay. Go ahead.
The sukun has a sign of majzoom on the front letter with a sound ending. It doesn't specify whether or not there's like a pronoun attached to the word. So is it a sukun regardless of whether there's a pronoun attached?
Yeah, so if you have an object to a verb that's a pronoun, like for instance, he hit him, right? So he hit is a daraba, and him would be who, darabahu, right? So that who would be attached to the verb, right? So if we make it mudari', right, he is hitting him, yadribuhu, right? So if the verb state changes, it doesn't affect the who part at the end because that's separate. So if it'll be lam yadribhu, right? Okay.
What about if it's any of the other 5? Because for the dhamma, they can't put them into sabia any shape.
Yeah.
So it's only for like you, she, you, or he, she, you, I, and us.
Yeah.
Is that the same for sukun?
Yeah, so the lam yattasil bi akhri shay, meaning the noon, or no, there is no noon of emphasis. It doesn't mean the pronoun. That's over. So it would be lam yaf'alhu, lam taf'alhu, lam taf'alhu, lam af'alhu, lam naf'alhu. So it wouldn't affect it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just to confirm that when there's like a dual or plural
Yeah.
ending attached to the fi'l mudari',
Yeah.
would the
if there's a dual or plural pronoun, or there's like yaf'alani. Yeah, so then it wouldn't be by vowel. You would see the noon fall off. So it would be those two men are not hitting him, right? Or you say are hitting him, just to make it easier. Yadribanihi. So the he is added to the end. Right? If I make it majzoom, say I wanted to say they didn't. Lam yadribahu. The noon falls off. Right? So nothing else changes. Right? Lam yadribahu. Right? Lam tadribuhu. Right? Allah says, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوهُ وَلَنْ تَفْعَلُوا. Right? فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَنْ تَفْعَلُوا. Now there's a different verse that has a dhamma on a dhamir on the end, a pronoun. If it's a sick letter, right? For instance, to call someone is da'a yad'u. Right? Yad'u is mudari', da'a is past tense. So he is calling him yad'uhu. Yad'uhu ila ta'am. He's calling him to food. Yad'uhu. So if I said he did not call him, it would be lam yad'uhu. The vowel would fall off and the pronoun would not be affected. So that's by vowel, right? And these two slides really just sum that up. We can print this out for anyone. Actually, we probably should do it now because later on we're going to need these. The second part is, as we put here, those are inflected by means of a letter, right? And the letter will tell you what the state is, right? As opposed to any vowel marks, right? So he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَالَّذِي يُعْرَبُ بِالْحُرُوفِ أَرْبَعَةُ أَنْوَاعٍ. Right? So you can see how the nahw is applied to the reading. Right? Those that are inflected by letters are 4, the dual noun. Right, so who can do the 3 sentences for us? Ja'a, ra'aytu, and marartu bi, with a dual noun. Right, so say the word imra'atun. Imra'atun means a woman. Right. So who wants to volunteer? Ja'a. Anyone? The women are beating you guys in there. Want to try it? No, not. Oh yeah, do. Yeah. Imra'atani. Ra'aytu. Imra'atani. Marartu bi imra'atani. Good. Alright, so we see that for the marfu' you have the alif noon. Right, the ani. Right, the reason why there's no focus on that last noon, right, that the focus is more on the letter before it, the alif or the ya, is because that noon can fall off. Right, if it's made into a possessive phrase, like for instance, how do you say 2 books in Arabic? Huh? I heard some kitabani. It's just kind of like wasawis, voices here and there. It's the masks, I think. Right, so kitabani or kitabaini, as you mentioned. Right, so if I want to say, right, the 2 books of Zaid, right, Zaid's 2 books. So it's a possessive phrase. I would say kitaba Zaidin. The noon falls off. Right, whenever it's made into a possessive phrase, that noon can fall off. So that's why we don't focus on the noon. Right? Kitaba Zaidin. Right? Qara'tu, I read kitabay Zaidin. It was kitabaini. The noon, they got rid of it. So the focus is on the alif or the ya. So if it's marfu', you have an alif. Right? Ja'a kitabani. The 2 books came, whatever that means. Maybe you ordered them from those books. Right? Or qara'tu kitabaini. I read 2 books. Right? Or marartu bi kitabaini. I passed by 2 books, right, on the ground and I picked them up because that's the etiquette. Okay. The second is unbroken masculine plurals. Right? So here we have ash-shakirun. Now I wanted to kind of diverge from the lesson a bit, because there's a lot of things that are mentioned in the books that are not, that almost assume that you have prerequisite knowledge to understand them. Because generally, for one reason, because these books would be taught to people who already speak Arabic. Right? Just like if you take English 101, they're not going to teach you what a word is. Right? They're just going to teach you how to use them properly, right? Because they assume that you already know English. Right? So just a very quick look at this. I'm going to erase our friend the Mabani, because, and we already talked about the vowels, so I'll erase that. We can still use this to point out some things. Okay. Not sure if you recall, but in the very beginning we talked about nouns, that there are a few types of nouns. There's nouns that have no they don't come from other words, and no words come from it. So they're not derived from other words, nor any word is derived from it. But then there's nouns that are called root nouns. Root nouns are like sleeping, eating, drinking. Right? They're not verbs, they're nouns. They express an action, right? But from these types of words in Arabic, other words are derived. Like for instance, if you use English equivalents, it still makes sense. Cooking, right? From cooking, you have, right, the cook, the person who cooks, right? You have the thing that is cooked, right? So same thing in Arabic. If we were to use, what is the word for book? Anyone know? Kitab. Right. Right. So, right, strangely enough, the root noun for to write is kitaba. Kitaba means to write. It's a root noun. That's where you get the word kitab, which is a book, something written. Right. The one who writes is the katib. Katibun is the writer. Right. Katibun is derived from kitaba. Right. This is called ism fa'il. And these will come up later, but it almost, right, it would be nice to know this now, because right, ism fa'il, it literally means the nominal doer, for lack of a better translation, right? Because the katib is the one who does kitaba. It's the doer of kitaba, right? So you'll see ism fa'il. Fa'il is the pattern. Fa'ilun, katibun. So any three-letter word that you know, right, just shout out any three-letter word. Daras? Right, so daras. If you were to say, right, so daras means a lesson, right? Technically, in really ancient Arabic, it means to wipe something out. So the idea of the lesson is to wipe out ignorance, right? So the one who does the lesson is the daris, fa'il, right? Katib, right? So we have another word here, shukr, right? Shakir, right? So shukr is gratitude. Shakir is the doer of gratitude, right? Same thing with, right? How do you say to cook? Anyone? I would think you know this one, right? All the travels. How do you say food? Ta'am, right? So ta'am is food. Ta'im is the eater. Right? Ta'im is the eater. Right, so that's one derivative. It's the ism fa'il, the nominal doer. Nominal meaning it's a noun. Nominal doer. Okay. The second most famous is the ism maf'ul maktub, right? Allah says about the Prophet Muhammad that he's speaking to the people of the previous traditions, that tajiduhu maktuban indakum, right? Maktuban fit Tawrati wal Injil, that you'll find him written about, right, in the Zabur and the Gospel, right? So maktub is something that was written. Something that was written, right? So you would say kitabun maktub, a book written, So this is the nominal object. And what's the pattern? Ismul maf'ul. Now you already know four words that are all on the pattern of maf'ul. Marfu', mansub, makhfud, majzoom. They're all on that pattern. Right? So the ism maf'ul is the nominal object. Right? So tabakha means to cook. Tabikh is the cook. Matbukh is the food, that which was cooked. Right? Kataba, kitaba means to write. Katib is the writer. Maktub is the book. Right? So, and there's more. Right? These are the most famous. So these are the most famous. So mashkur is what the Arabs would say to you if they're showing their appreciation to you. Mashkur, meaning anta mashkur. You are appreciated. The one who gratitude was shown to, not by. Because by would be shakir. Tamam. So now, the ism fa'al and the ism maf'ul are both, they end up becoming plural, like an unbroken masculine plural. So if you want to make them plural, you would say katibuna, right? Or katibina if it's mansub. Right? So the angels that write down the deeds are known as kiraman katibin. Kiraman katibin, the noble scribes. Tamam. One last one just for fa'ida is the ism makan. Ismul makan. Makan means place. Right, so the pattern is so I mentioned this is a bit of a digression, but so maf'al shows the place that the action was happened in. So maktab is literally a desk, right, or an office. You can use, sometimes they use it for library as well, maktabah, because it's the place where you write on, the maktab. Masjid is the place that you make sajda. So how do you say the one who makes sajda, the doer of the sajda? Sajid. Very good. The matbakh is the kitchen. The mat'am is the place where you eat, the restaurant. Right, so the maqbara is the place, right, the graveyard, because qabara means to bury someone. Okay, tamam. So the ism fa'il, katib, and the ism maf'ul, they become plural like this, the unbroken plural. So most of the examples that we've been using, shakirun, shakirin, they're all ism fa'il. Right? Muslimun, muslimin, they're also ism fa'al from a different form. Tamam. Right, salihun, salihin. Tamam. Right, so ja'a shakirun. Right, ja'a shakirun. Ra'aytu shakirin. Right? And marartu bi shakirin. Right? So if it's mansub, it'll get ya noon. If it's majroor, it'll get ya noon. Right? Only when it's marfu' will it get a waw noon. Right? And you can distinguish between the last two by context. Right? Ra'aytu shakirin. There's no harf khaft, right? That would make it makhfud. And it's the object. The next one is the five nouns. We did not mention this, and I just wrote that. I don't feel like erasing it. Right, but the five nouns, they're only shown, right? Their inflection is only shown by letters if they are ascribed to something else. Right? And this is the possessive phrase that we talked about before. Right? So what's the word for father in Arabic? Eb, right? Just eb. Right? So if you leave it by itself, just eb, right? It's ja'a abun. Right? Ra'aytu aban and marartu bi abin. Right? But if you make it ascribed to something else, like someone's father or the father of someone, right, then it falls under this. Right? So if I don't want to say just father, I want to say Zayd's father, right, I would say Abu Zaydin. The vowel comes back. Because originally Eb was Abwun. Right? Abwun is 3 letters. Because usually words don't have less than 3 letters. At least nouns don't. So Abwun Right? The Arabs, again, they love their fluidity in their language, so they just say abun. Abun is too difficult. Abwin is even worse. Right? So, but it comes back when you ascribe it to someone. Right? So Abu Bakrin, right? Abu Zaydin. Right? Right? Same thing. And then Aba, right? Bakrin, Abi Bakrin, according to the level. Right? So Ja'a Abu Bakrin. Ra'aytu, what is it? Aba Bakrin. Right? And Marartu bi Abi Bakrin. So the ya is the majroor. The dhamma is, the waw is the marfu, and the alif is the mansub. Right? And then the last is the five verbs, which are yaf'alu, taf'alu, af'alu, and naf'alu. There's something wrong there. Right, no, sorry. The five verbs, right, are the other ones, right? The ones that have the noons attached to the end. So you have yaf'alani, yaf'aluna, right? If you combine all the duals together and make them one, then it becomes five. Otherwise, it's seven. Right? So yaf'alani, yaf'aluna, taf'alani, right? Taf'alani again, taf'aluna, taf'alina, and taf'alani. Seven. Right? So those, they would be all the other ones except for the two feminine plurals. Because yaf'alna and taf'alna, they're mabni. They are from that first category. Okay, tamam. Right, so just for the illustration, some people learn by seeing. Right, all of them are written down here. Right, so the dual, rajulani if it's marfu', rajulaini if it's mansub or makhfud. Right. So you see that the ya is shared between the mansub and the makhfud. The unbroken masculine plural, right, is the waw noon, is the marfu'. Okay, and the ya is the sign for the mansub and the makhfud together. Marartu bi muslimina, right, passed by the Muslims. All right, marartu bi shakirin. Right. The word marartu bi is in the hadith of the Prophet, is in the prophetic narrations, right? إذا مررت برياض الجنة فارتعوا. If you pass by the gardens of paradise, then graze therein. إذا مررت برياض الجنة. Right. The five nouns, Abu Bakr, right, Aba Bakr, Abi Bakr, right. Likewise the other four, right. So Hamu Bakr, right, brother's brother-in-law, right? Bakr's brother-in-law. The Prophet said Al-Hamul Maut, right, the brother-in-law's death. Right. Or the in-law, I should say. Right. جاء ذو القرنين رأيت ذا القرنين مررت بذي القرنين. The Qarnayn is the famous personality in the Quran. Right, and then the five verbs, right, they are, right, on the basis of the noon. Right, the noon staying, it's marfu'. The noon falls off, it's either majzoom or mansub. Where's makhfud? What's the sign of a verb being makhfud? Or majroor, whatever madhab you follow. What's the sign that a verb is majroor? Sorry? Jazm. Yeah, no. Yeah, what are you saying? There is no majroor for verbs. Sorry, just to check. So once you see a noon, marfu'. No worry, no extra work needed. Right? So if you say, right, if you read the Quran and you see noons everywhere, just know that everything's marfu'. Right? Why? That's a whole different story. Right? So the last part, he goes into verbs. We did not go too much into verbs yet, because this chapter, this section, I should say, right, is where grammar meets morphology. As much as some people would like to keep them separate, right, they do meet, right, in some places. Right? We already have been talking about the word ending in 6 letters, that the letter will fall off if it's majzoom. We've been talking about a few things, right, but nothing really deeply related to the verbs. Right, so he says that verbs, al-af'al, the plural of fi'l, right, al-af'alu thalathatun, there are three types. Right, the al-madi, and we'll talk about later that if you take off the alif lam, it's madin. Because saying madiyun is hard on the Arabs. Madiyun. Right, so you'll see in the actual text, it says, first one is madin. Right, and in the Quran, فَقْضِ مَا أَنْتَ قَاضٍ. Right, because the ya is hard to read. But if alif lam is there, the ya comes back, so I put it, right, so to make it easier. Al-madi is a past tense verb. Mada is a verb which means something past already. Right? If I say, أَمْضَيْتُ وَقْتِي, I passed my time. Right? I passed up. Al-mudari' is, again, future or present tense. Right? And then the third is the command, the amr. Some styles, they add the nahi, the negative command, the prohibition as well. Right? Some saw it just as it's a mudari' with a la in front of it. But these are the three main ones. Past tense verbs are all mabani, all of them. Right? They are all non-inflected. Right? The mudari' is where the changes happen. Either the noon stays or it doesn't, or if it's singular, then you see the sukun, the fatha, or the dhamma. Right? Or if it has a sikh letter, then the sikh letter falls off if it's majzoom. Otherwise, you'll see it remain. And if it has a fatha, it's mansub. Right? Lan yajriya. It stays there and it has a fatha. Right? So, inshallah, we'll print this. This is the whole scale of form 1 of the verbs. Right? So past tense is here, present tense in the middle, which is what you've already memorized, right? Except that the root letters are different. Instead of yaf'alu, it becomes yaktubu. So we've been talking about, right? Kitaba means to write. Katib is the writer. Yaktubu, he is writing, right? Is the verb version. And you'll see the pronouns change throughout. Yaktubu, he is writing, they are writing, we are writing, and so forth. Kataba, past tense, he wrote. Right. And if you want to make them negative, you can say, right, for past tense, ma kataba, right, or present tense, la yaktubu. Just add a la in front of it. But the third column we haven't touched on, which is the command. Right. You'll notice that there's only 6. Right, because the command that we're talking about is a second person command, because you can't technically command somebody who's not there. Right, can you say there, is anyone named Zaid here? No, Zaid. Okay, say Zaid, go sit down. Right, it doesn't work. He's not here. Right. There is a type of command for third person which has the meaning of should. Right, it has liyaktub. Right, he should write. Right, let him write. Right, so here the only reason there's 6 is because these are the second person ones. Right? They match with the other 2 scales. Right? Taktubu, you are writing. Taktubani, you 2 are writing. Taktubuna, you 3 are writing. Taktubina, you 1 woman are writing. Taktubani, you 2 women are writing. And taktubna, you 3 women are writing. You'll see that all the commands are majzoom. They're all majzoom. So the last letter, right? It was taktubu becomes uktub. Right, the tab becomes a hamza. It becomes uktub. Taktubani, the noon falls off. Right, and the ta is changed to a hamza. Uktuba. Right, and so forth. This is not a sarf class. Right, but you'll see, like taktubina. Right, if you take the ta and change it to a hamza, right, it will be uktubina. But then it's majzoom, the noon falls off. Uktubi. So they're directly related to the ones that they're across from in the mudari'. Because in form 1, the command is made from the mudari'. Right. In form 2 to 10, they're made from the past tense. Right, but that's not what he wants to focus on. But I will hand out this chart to everyone, right, if they wish to memorize it. The most important for our class is the present tense category, and possibly later on the command, because it's majzoom. But he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, that the madi, the past tense verb is مفتوح الآخر أبدا. Always ends in a fatha as its default. Now notice, he said fatha, he didn't say mansub. Right? Because fatha is a sign of mansub in words that accept inflection. Right? But, like if I were to put the word for then, if I were to put the word for then in Arabic, anyone know how to say then in Arabic? Thumma. Right? Thumma is a harf. It is a particle. What does thumma end in? A fatha. Right? But can we say that thumma is mansub? No, because it's like it's a particle. It's not even a noun for it to be mansub. Right? So similarly, past tense verbs are not. They're mabni. They are stuck the way they are. Right? But it will end in a fatha. So kataba, right? Daraba, shakara. Any word that you know, right, that we've been using, for instance, if you want to put it in past tense, you would just put it on the form of fa'ala. Fa'ala. Right? Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. Fa'ala. Right? He did. Right? So it always ends in a fatha as its default. Right? Now, if you look back at that chart, oops, apologies. If you look back at the chart, right, where it says kataba is the first one, and that's its default, right? But it starts to change after that. Kataba, katabu, katabat, and I hope those who took the previous class still remember this, right? So, but then it starts to change a bit. We'll talk about that in a second, right? So the default is the fatha, right? And then it lends itself to changes, right? The command is always majzoom. Always majzoom. Right? The mudari' is default is marfu'. Right? Its default is marfu'. Right? And it will remain marfu' until a nasib or a jazim. Right? Notice, remember the scale, the pattern fa'il. What does fa'il mean? The nominal doer. Good. Right? So the nasib is the word that makes something mansub. Right, so the default of a mudari' is that it's marfu'. Right. If a nasib enters upon it, like len, right, yaf'alu, len yaf'ala. Right, that's a nasib. It made the word mansub. Right, or a jazim is a word that makes the other word majzoom. Good. Right, so yaf'alu is my default. Yaf'alu, the dhamma, it's marfu'. If I add lam, which is a jazim, right, then it becomes lam yaf al, right, with a sukun. Right, so he says that the mudari' is always marfu', right? And then if you skip that one line in the middle, because we'll explain that in a second, unless a nasib or a jazim enter upon it. Right, so its default is marfu', right, until one of those types of letters enters upon it, and then it will change. He says, the middle line here, right, that the mudari' begins with one of the 4 additional letters, and some combine it to meet into a sentence, anaitu. Right? If you want to memorize it, anaitu. Hamza, noon, ya, ta. Some say atayna, because atayna is they came. Right? Or you can just memorize them separately, the hamza, the noon, the ya, or the ta. So you have yaf'alu, starts with a ya. Yaf'alu. So that ya is not a root letter. The root letter is the fa, the ayn, the lam. And if you want to know the root letters, just put it back into the past tense. Right, so yaktubu, past tense, kataba. Right, so the ya is no longer there. The ya is added to it to make it mudari'. Right, so the ya, the ta, taf'alu. Right, so the ta, you or she. Right, the hamza, af'alu, I am doing. Right? And naf'alu, we are doing. Right? So those are added to the beginning of the mudari'. So if you're looking at a word and you're confused of what it is, right, if it starts with any of these, one of these 4 letters, right, as an additional letter, right, then you can tell that it's a mudari' and not a past tense, because some letters get tricky, right? And some letters you can really test people on. We used to always pick on the previous year students with really weird words of the Qur'an, like unique words, I should say, like اطلع الغير أم اتخذ, تنزل الشياطين, and some tricky questions. Okay, but if you can tell what are the 4 additional letters in the beginning, you can tell that it's mudari'. Right? Tanazzalu is a tricky one because you're allowed to drop the ta off. Right? What Surah Al-Qadr? Right? What is that? That it's khayrun min alfi shahr. Right? That it's better than 1,000 months. The night of power is better than 1,000 months. Right? Was it? What's after that? Tanazzalu al-malaika. Tanazzalu al-malaika. If it was past tense, it would be tanazzala. Has to end in fatha. It doesn't. It's tanazzalu. Right? It's form 5. It was tatanazzalu, but the Arabs dropped off that ta sometimes. It comes up in Surah Shu'ara as well. Tanazzalu shayateen. So that ta is additional. That first ta is dropped off. The second ta is part of the word. Right. So next week we're going to talk about those nasib, the word that those particles that cause the next word to be mansub. Right. And most likely we'll also add the jazim in there. Right. So you have that which calls the next word to be majzum. This would be a great time to start building the vocab of verbs. Right. Especially now that we've at least touched on this. Right. If you can learn any 3 letters, right, any 3-letter verb, right, you really have, right, from the scale that we just gave you, right, you can put it into past tense. You can put it into present tense. You can use the ism fa'il. You can use the ism maf'ul, and you can use the ism makan, right, the place. Right, all from one word. Right, and you already know hundreds of words. If you know 5 words, you can turn into 100 very quickly. Very quickly, just by learning the science of sarf. Right, so like for instance, sajada. What does sajada mean? Sajada is past tense verb. He prostrated. Yasjudu, he is prostrating. Usjud, right, Allah tells the angels prostrate to Adam. Right, usjudu li Adam. Right, but also you have the place of prostration, masjid. Right, the prostration itself, sajda, the person who prostrates, the sajid. Right, but then even further than that, what is the carpet called? Sajjada. Right? Sajjada. Right? Generally, the sajjada is used for that type of carpet, the prayer rug itself. Right? But all of these, they're mixed together. Now, before we close, we mentioned that the past tense verb, its default is the fatha. Right? Kataba, fa'ala, daraba, shakara, right? Ja'ala. And that applies to even if it's not form 1. Right, so like for instance, Ar-Rahman, what's the next word? Allama al-Qur'an. Right, the most merciful taught the Qur'an. Allama ends in a fatha. Khalaqa ends in a fatha. Tanazzala, we just said, right, ends in a fatha, to come down. Right, so the default of the past tense is a fatha no matter what form it's in. So there's 10 forms, right? But it only shows up, right, as its default in these following situations. Right? First, when there's nothing attached to its end. Right? So kataba, it's just the default 3 letters, just the bare bones 3 root letters. That's it. Kataba, nothing extra, right, nothing added. Kataba Zaydun. Who can translate that? Kataba Zaydun. Zayd? Wrote. Right? Because this is a past tense verb. Right? Yaktubu Zaydun. What does it mean? Zayd writes. Good. Right? What if I said Kataba Zaydan? That's a tricky one. He wrote Zayd. Good. Because Zayd is the object then, right? So right, if I said Kataba ila Zayd, he wrote to Zayd, right? Because تمام. So kataba, there's nothing attached to it at all. It remains on its fatha. Kataba, the last letter is a fatha. The second one is that it ends in a ta of feminine. Katabat. Right, katabat, she wrote. Right, so katabat Fatima too. Right, Fatima wrote. Right, so you see that what is the final root letter of the verb? Not additional letters attached to it, but the root letter itself. What are the three root letters? What are they? Kaf, ta, and ba. Right, so what is the vowel on the ba, the last letter in this situation? Fatha. Right, so it still has its fatha. Right, we just added a ta to the end, a ta sukun, which means hiya, she. Right, she did. Right, here in this case, she wrote. Right, you can replace the pronoun she with the actual name if you make it marfu' afterwards. So instead of saying katabat, she wrote, katabat Fatima too. Right, Fatima wrote. Right, the she is irrelevant now. You don't have to repeat it. Right, and then the last one is if it's dual, kataba, they wrote. Those two men wrote. Right, so ar-rajulani, the two men, kataba, wrote. Right, they wrote. Those two men wrote. Right, so the last letter is the ba. The ba still has a fatha on it. Right, so nothing changed. Its default is still there. We just have an additional letter. Right, which shows who the doer is. Right, so the ta is she, right? Nothing is he, right? And the alif is dual, those two men. Right, right? And right, we mentioned a few examples of words that end in 6 letters, but we only talked about it insofar as the mudari', right? Like yajri, right? And yad'u and yas'a. We talked about in the mudari' that they would fall off if they're majzoom. Lam yas'a, lam yajri, and lam yad'u. The waw drops off, the waw, the ya, and the alif. But in the past tense, right, da'a, hada, and rama, right, they all end in 6 letters. Right, so you'll see the fatha on the middle letter, but you won't see it on the last letter because it's a type of alif. Right, you'll just say rama. Right, because that last letter will be pronounced as an alif. So you won't see the fatha on its last letter, it's just implied. It's implied. Right. Tamam. So Rama, right, Zaydun. Zayd threw. Rama yarmi means to throw. You can add these to your vocab. Rama yarmi, to throw. The archer is the Rami. Right? Fa'il. The bullseye is the marma, like maf'al is the marma. Right. Hada, yahdi means to guide. Right. So hada, right. Hada Zaydun, Zayd guided. Right. Hada Zaydan, he guided Zayd. Right. Da'a means to call. Da'a yad'u, wallahu yad'u ila dar salam. Allah calls to the abode of peace. Right. Da'a yad'u, tamam. So that it's implied there. Right? You can't put it because it's a 6 letter. There's no way to show up. It used to be ramaya, hadaya, da'awa, right? But that's difficult. It's not fluid. Tamam. Now we're straying away from the defaults. So there's certain situations where, right, you won't see a fatha even in the past tense. Right, and that is if the end of the word, the final root letter, is connected to something else, right, that has a vowel on it. They're connected to something that has a vowel on it. Right, and these things that are connected to the end are the pronouns that you can tell the meanings of the words in it. Right, so the first one, katabna. That na means those 3 or more women. It means hunna. Hunna means they. Specifically those 3 women. Right? They, plural, feminine. Katabna. So if we said, right, fa'alna, katabna, shakarna, right, tabakhna, ja'alna, all of that means they did. Right? They cooked, they walked, they talked, they wrote. Right? Shakarta, ta, anta. Right? Anta, you. Shakarta, you are grateful. Allah says, in shakarta, la in shakarta, la azidannakum. And if la in shakartum la azidannakum, if you are grateful, then I will increase you. So ta is you, one man, plural, or you, one man. Right? Jalastuma, tuma is you, two men. So this is all second person. Jalastuma, what does it mean? Jalastuma? You two sat. Right? You two, specifically, you two. Right? It could mean man or woman, because dual is technically shared. How do you say a place of sitting? Majlis. Right? The place, maf'al. How do you say a person who's sitting? Jalis. Jalis, right? You can say huwa jalisun. He is sitting, right? Rakibtum. Rakibtum. Antum is right, plural. Rakiba means to ride on something. The markab is a conveyance. You can call your car a markab. You can call your camel if you have one in your backyard. Right? A markab is something you ride on. Right? So rakibtum, you all rode. Right? Sami'ti, anti, right? You one woman heard. Sami'a. Masma' is another word for the hearing. Right? It's not as common, but right, they say it. Right? Ulqiya ala masami'i. Right? It was brought across my ears. Right? Masma'. The Sami' is one of the names of Allah. As-Sami' or As-Sami' is the all-hearer, right? The one who hears all. Right? Talabtunna is another feminine plural, but for second person and not right? Third person. Talabna, just the noon. Talabna. Right? Talabtunna, antunna, you all women, right? Sought. Right? The student is the talib. The talib. Two students is taliban, but not in Fars. Don't say it don't say that in too many places. And actually, the word that's used for that, that's actually a Persian word which is plural, taliban. It's like in Urdu, to say a plural of Muslim is musliman. Right? It's not a alif noon. It's not like muslimani, like in Arabic. It's not dual. So talib is the student. The matlub is the goal. Right? That's why one of the meanings of La ilaha illallah is La matluba illallah. There's nothing sought except Allah, right? Except for God. Matlub, right? Matlab, right? Is the place of seeking. Right? Sajadna is the last thing. So you'll see that the last letter of all of these words has a sukun on it, and then the pronoun is attached. Right? But that pronoun has a haraka on it. Right? Whereas the pronoun previously, the katabat, that ta is the pronoun, but it doesn't have a vowel. It has a sukun. Right? And then the last is the dhamma, and that's only in one situation, is the third person, masculine plural. Sami'u, right? They heard. Darabu, they hit. Right? Sami' darib. Right? So that's a bit out of our subject. But I found that a lot of the reason why some people falter in the grammar is because of a lack of at least some sort of introduction into sarf, into morphology, right? Because they do overlap, right? And the Arab doesn't need it. The Arab, you don't need, like most of us, you don't have to say that he is, they are, she was. Right? You don't need that. Right? You just need to know conditional sentences and where to put those godforsaken commas. Right? Commas. The thing about English, there's so many exceptions. Right? Arabic is tough, but there's no exceptions. Even the exception has a rule itself. Right, so I wanted to just leave some time for questions, if anyone has any questions. And also, did anyone have any difficulty with the take-home work last week? The Surah Al-Ghashiyah. Right. And just to note, so you guys don't leave without that, if you want to make the doer, the nominal doer, feminine, you just put a ta. Right? Katibatun is a feminine. Right? Talibatun, shakiratun. Right, so Surah Al-Ghashiyah, Ghashiyatun is ism fa'il. Right. Ghasha yakhsha means to cover something. Al-Ghashiyah, that which enshrouds. It's another name for the Day of Judgment. Right. Hal ataka hadith al-Ghashiyah. Did the discussion or the matter of the Ghashiyah come to you? Did the news of the Ghashiyah come to you? Wujuhun yawma idhin khashi'ah. Khashi'ah. Right, faces on that day will be humbled. Khashi'ah is a humbled person. Amilatun nasibatun. Right, having worked hard and fatigued. May Allah save us. So, any questions? Or anything that anyone didn't get 100%? Yeah.
Those inflected letters, the E now,
Yeah.
is it, I missed one of them, so, Ja'a muslimatan, Ra'aytu muslimatain,
Mm-hmm.
and Maraktu muslimatain.
Yes. So, has anyone had a chance to get the Hansware dictionary? Or does anyone still not have it? Oh, he brought it. Perfect. Anyone still not have it? Everyone has it? SubhanAllah. One? Okay. There's a PDF app also, a searchable app. The book is better. Okay, I'm being really nice right now. The book is much better, but I've become a bit brainwashed from my teachers. They don't like, because if you use the book, you'll pass by so many words that you're not even looking for them, but you'll pass by them looking for this word, and you'll learn more words. Right? I can testify to that. Okay, here it is. I'll just quickly erase this in the few minutes that we have left. How many people have it with them, either in physical form or on their phones? Anyone not have it? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I just want to put some examples up so I don't have to think. We want to look up a few words from here. So I'll just put the ones that we have here. Okay, some of them harder than others. Right, so again, almost every word in Arabic has 3 root letters. Right, there are some words that have 4. Generally, if you're looking up a 4-letter word, you'll just look up alphabetically. You'll just keep looking until you get to that word. But if you're looking up a 3-letter word, right, whether it be a noun or a verb, you want to strip it to its bare bones 3 root letters. Right, so like for instance, we put words on there like sami'u. Right, what are the 3 root letters of sami'u? Sim, mim, ayn. Good. Right. So same thing applies to a noun. Right. Right. Sami'. Right. So let's try to look at the word sami' first, before we take the verse. Actually, we'll just make space. So look up Sin, Mim, Ain first. And I'll use my phone, break my own rule. But just to walk you through what you're going to find when you see it. Okay. Everyone have it? And so forth. Okay, everyone have it? Okay, so we've been talking about sarf, so this is a slight introduction. But if you look up sami'a, the first thing you're going to get is the verbs, the meanings of the verbs. Right? That whole entire paragraph until it ends, it's all verbs, right, with its different types. Right? So first, what he does, right, he gives the Arabic with no vowels. And that's just so you can look it up, pretty much. Right, but he tells you how these vowels are pronounced in English. Right, so sa, that's the sin with the fatha, mi, and then a. Right, so what he does, right, this middle letter is the most important. The other ones are always going to be, right, the same. The middle letter is important. If he uses an I, right, that equals a kasra. If he uses a U, like if you use the word karuma, he'll say ka ru ma. Right? The U is a lamma. Right? And then the A, if you look up fa'ala, right? Fa, right? It's actually a bad. The A would be a fatha. All right, tamam. So the middle letters can change according to the word it is. Right? So you have jalasa, you have sami'a with a kasra, you have hasunat ulaika, right? Hasuna. Right? That's because of the nature of form 1. Right? But he tells you how to pronounce this. Even though this doesn't have any vowels, right? He'll tell you in the English. Right? So karuma, right? Fatha, dhamma, fatha. Karuma. After that, he has parentheses and then a whole bunch of words. Right? Sometimes you'll find only one in there. Some words like sami'a, you'll find how many? 1, 2, 3, 4 words. Those are all root nouns. Right? Some words have more than one root noun. Right? So you can say, but again, he doesn't put the Arabic, he puts the English. Right? So the first one is sam'un. Right? Sama'. Right, so sam'un, he doesn't tell you the last verb, he just tells you this, sama'. Right? You want to make it marfu', mansub, however you want, right? Sama'. The second one is sama'. Right, they all have the same meaning. So again, this is a word that denotes action, but with no tense, right, and no doer. Right, so the sami' is an action and a doer, but no tense. Right, mesma is there. You can see mesma. Right, but then he tells you the meaning, to hear. Right, now, that first meaning is form 1. That first meaning is form 1. Right, and then he'll give you different nuances of that form 1 meaning if you use different letters. Right, so if I said, here he says to hear, and then he has a little ha. Right, that ha is the object. You can go straight into the object. Sami' to who. Right? Asma'u hu. I hear him. I hear it. Right? You don't have to. right? So if you ever see that ha, that little ha, right, that means that that word is transitive. Right? It's muta'addi, it's not lazim. Right? It's transitive, right? As opposed to jalasa, he sat. You can't sit something, right? So you won't see a ha there. You'll see ala, he sat on, or he sat in. You'll see, so, right? Then you see a B, right? I heard about something. That ba, you see the ba, everyone? Right after to here, he says, right, someone or something, and then ba, right? Of or about someone or something, right? So I can say sami'tu bihi, I heard about him, right? Asma'u bihi. Okay, and then he gives you different meanings, right? To be told about something, to pay attention. Asma'u ilah, right? Asma'u ilayhi. I'm paying attention to him, right? Or I'm listening to him. But then you see in the Roman numeral 2. Everyone see the Roman numeral 2? Okay, so the first paragraph of meanings, that's all the first meaning, the first form. Right? Then you'll see a Roman numeral 2. Right? This is the 10 different forms that we're talking about. Right? So some forms have many out of the 10. Some forms you only find 1 out of the 10. Right? So for form 1, he'll tell you in English how it's pronounced, sami'a. Right? But form 2 to 10, he assumes that you know the forms. Right? He's not going to tell you. It's in the preface of the book if you really want to dig. Right? But form 2 is, right? They'll have a tashdeed on the middle letter. Samma'a. Samma'a. So you have allama al-Qur'an. Right? So then he gives you the meanings for form 2. To make or let someone else hear. So now it becomes, right, a transitive, right, to someone else. Instead of I heard him, samma'tuhu, I made him listen. I made him hear. Right? And then then there's no 3. There's no form 3. Right? So form 3 would be fa'ala. Right? But there is a form 4. Right? Which is asma'a, where you get the word aslama, right? Amana. Right? That is to make or let someone hear similar. Right? Form 5, tasamma'a. We're just going to do whatever ones they show here. We're not going to do all of them for the sake of time. Right? Tasamma'a, to give ear or to listen, to lend one's ear, to eavesdrop. Right? Tasamma'tu alayhim. Right? I snuck a listen. Right? Then you have form 7, tasama'a, he already writes there, and then form 8, istama'a, right? Which is in the Qur'an, actually. Right? But for the sake of time, right? So the forms are in the preface. After that, you have nouns. After that, so if you're looking up a noun like kitab, first you'll see is kataba, and then all its forms, and then you'll see words like kitab, maktab, maktub, right? So here he has right? Sam'iyun, right, is something that is hearable, auditive. Right? Sum'ah is reputation, because you want people to hear about you. Right? That's why they say, right, that we don't worship Allah sum'atan wala riya'a. Riya'an wa sum'atan is to show off and to be heard about, fame. Right? So sama', hearing, sama'i is acoustic. Sama'iyat, acoustics, or sami' is a person who's hearing. That's an emphatic form of sami', which is one of the names of Allah he mentions here. Samma'a are headphones. SubhanAllah. Right? Headphones are samma'a. Right? Sim'an is one of the biblical figures. Simon. Right? Masma', right? And so forth. Misma'. Right? And you'll see a lot of different, right, derivatives, all of them derivatives of that verb. So these are the derivative nouns that we're talking about. Right? So now, right, and this applies to nouns as well. So you can look up the noun the same way, except that you'll just skip that first paragraph. There's more to be said, but we'll stop there. We want to try to help you guys build your vocabs. Right? So if there's any suggestions anyone has that we can help in doing that, then we would love to hear it. Right? The homeworks that we've given, you can go back to them and do the same thing.
Increase the vocab. Last time you suggested either doing a book,
Yeah.
Rashida or the Rashida.
Yeah.
So should we start doing it from now?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, so if you have any book that's written in Arabic, right, as a kind of a jump-off point, use that, your Hans word dictionary, right, and as they say, right, my teacher told me, marry your books, right? No student should be seen without like their books in their hands. Some of our teachers would be upset. You hold like a prayer beads, right? Where's your book? Like, this is not the stage of your life that you should be worried about, right? And this is time for study. So to use that, but it doesn't have to be a lot. Even like 3 words a day, 4 words a day, even like 15 words a week or something like that, right? You'll be very surprised very quickly. Your vocab will jump, right? And on top of that, if you consider the derivatives of each word, right, you'll know 2,000 words within less than a year, most definitely. A teacher of mine, he told me to do from the Qur'an 5 words a day, right? And I think it took after reaching about 7 juz, right, it was very, very helpful even till today. Right? 7 juz of Qur'an, that's what, right, 20 pages per juz, so that's it's a good amount. So it's, right? The words are repeat, some words repeat, but you'd be very surprised at how many nouns and verbs there. And then, so Al-Qira'at al-Rashida is definitely a great work. Qasas al-Nabiyyin, the stories of the prophets, is also a great work. If anyone has any other suggestions, they can, right? Anything will work, really. But the requirement is, right, diligence and consistency. Right? 3 words a day, and then have a day for revision, to go back, close the book, say them out loud to yourself, have somebody test you. Right? Put them on flashcards if you wish, if that helps you. Right? And then the words that are coming in the lesson, it's a shortcut.
We can't make it to class. How do we get the lesson? And in the lesson, is it a video, or can you do like Facebook? Is it live at the same time?
I believe,
For those?
yeah, I believe the slides are definitely on the live stream, so which you can get, I think, on Facebook and or YouTube, even after the fact, later on. If you're registered for the class, then we're trying to figure out a way to send the homeworks and everything. We'll send the slides as well through that. Is anyone here not registered? Like formally registered? Okay, I think Ustada, you can tell Ustada at the end. So we'll just send it through that. That'll probably be the easiest way. If anyone misses the class, then they can use that and then follow along from the class. There's no homework for today, mashallah. But the focus really is just vocab. Right? Focus on the vocab and make friends with Mr. Hans Ware. Right? Damat barakatuhu. Right? Make friends with the dictionary. Really, just try to use it. Use it for random things. Just explore it. Read it. And search weird words if you want to, but just keep it nearby. Shaykh Hamza Yusuf said there's not a single day goes by except that he uses that dictionary. And his Arabic is exponentially greater than mine. So, the Arabic is very deep. So we'll pause there, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala sayyidina Muhammad wa sallam. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.